And this is giving me kind of a base starting point. I can always come back to it later and remember everything that I needed to about the assembly at this point in time. If anyone has any questions coming along, please don't hesitate to go ahead and ask any questions. You can use the interface over on the right-hand side of your screen to ask any questions. Okay, the next thing we want to do, let's jump back over to our PowerPoint and we'll recap kind of what we're talking about. So again, we've talked about how we're reusing our native CAD data, all the different file types we can open within Composer. Working in an independent environment, that's really important to not have the engineers involved if they do not need to be when creating that documentation. Our assembly structure looks exactly like it does in Solidworks, so we have that continuity between the two different environments. The UI is very easy to use, as well as, there's just some different graphical choices. So let's start talking about what kind of content we can create. We are going to create a parts list for our assembly. And let's just jump right in. Go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to create another image quickly. And this is going to be called our parts list. So I'm just going to rename that to my parts list. And our parts list, we do not want to create it as a shaded like this, so we're going to change our render style over to a silhouette. And we have multiple tools to help us, help explode out our content or project what we're looking for. Remember, we're dealing with a 3D model here. So let's just go ahead and start making some explosions here. We'll just select this, and I can right-click and have a list, a subset of tools. And I simply just want to translate this out, so I'm going to select the translate tool and move that off. And then let's zoom in here. We want to get this subassembly here. We're going to move that out as well. And we can actually choose which direction we want this information to go as well. So I can choose to pull that out of my hole that way. Now I can also select things off of the tree as well. So if I come over here, I can actually select on a few components here. And then I'm just going to explode them in a very specific direction. I want those to go straight off in that direction there. All right, so that's given us a good start here. Let's see, do we have any questions? No, everything looks good. If you guys, again, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm just looking through here. Looks like we have a hand raised. Does someone have any questions out there? I'm waiting for a question to come through, I think. Okay, I have a couple of questions here. Actually, it looks like it's the same question. I do a lot of work telling SolidWorks my metals and colors. Does this carry over into 3D Via? Is our plan to further define the categories so that metals can carry over better into 3D VM. Okay, let me answer that question this way. So let me close this. First of all, let me update my view. So I'm just going to retake that picture to update that view. We're going to come back and create our content here. But let's, real briefly here, I'm just going to create another simple little image so we can talk a little bit about this. The question is referring to my colors and materials coming out of SolidWorks. So if my materials are actually, the material appearances are not going to translate into SolidWorks, but the colors will. So whatever the native colors are in SolidWorks, those will come over into Composer as well. But we do have some coloring or material effects. So if I select on a particular component, under my environment effects here, I have a little bit, a couple options here. I can change it to be chrome, or maybe I want to make it out of gold, aluminum. So I have some environmental effects that I can use to help project a component and what that component is going to look like. I also can create some of my own custom environmental effects as well. So I can usually simply choose a map path off of like a downloaded image from SolidWorks or from the internet, and that will wrap that material image around the model as well. So you're not limited. As far as coming from SolidWorks, the materials coming from SolidWorks over into Composer, I haven't heard anything about that happening yet, but there's always a chance for things to change and for that type of an enhancement to come in. So I would always recommend that as well.
Muted.
Okay, so let's just remove that view. And then we'll come back over here to our parts list, and let's talk a little bit about any we're going to talk about some of our workshops. So Composer has a lot of different workshops. The first one we're going to talk about here is our BOM workshop. So I'm just going to turn on my BOM workshop, make sure that's tacked out in place so it'll stay out here. And simply what I want to do is I want to start getting some what we call callouts or BOM IDs on our component. So I'm just going to select everything. And so then we'll choose to create some callouts. Now, depending on how you select things is what type of callouts you're going to get. So that's not actually the selection that I'm looking for there. So I'm going to jump over to my assembly tree. And we're going to select, using a shift select here, I'll select everything up for just my parts. So those are the parts at the top level. Then I want to add all of my assemblies as well as assembly components. So I'm just selecting all of those components. So now I have everything selected in the manner that I want it to show up as a bill of material. And when I say generate my BOM IDs, now I have a few less components. All right. Now we can have full control over how we want my BOM to look here. So I can choose some of the properties that come. These are all component properties inside of Composer, so I can leverage this information. But we're also using what we call metadata. These are like the custom properties that come out of SolidWorks. So if you're utilizing custom properties in SolidWorks, all of that information is going to carry directly over into our model in Composer. And we can leverage all of those properties as well. So as I scroll down here, maybe I'm looking for my number here, and I can just add that to my list. I can also rename it. So I want to call this my part number. And then I can control the order that's going to happen. So I can actually select that and just move it up on my list. Let's take my description. We'll move it down a little bit. And I can apply that. And then we see my bill of materials completely filled out. Okay. Also, this bill of material, it's got properties to it. We saw some of that highlighting, that cross-highlighting we did. That's just a property of the bill of material. We'll simply turn that on, and now when I mouse over, you can see how that highlighting starts to happen and reflecting me which component we're actually dealing with. And we can position this wherever we would like. I could have it be at the bottom, at the top, over at the left or the right. We're just going to stick it over here on the left. And we can control the size that we want it to be in as well. So I can actually adjust the size and the scale of this bill of material. I can place it wherever I would like it to be. Let's just set it right down here on the bottom. And the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to get some callouts on here so that our BOM IDs are matched up. Let's go ahead and change the order of those columns. Let's get my BOM ID over there on the first column. And once we have our columns set the way we want, you can always save this and capture it, so you don't have to use it or do this process every time. So you can save what the order and what the column properties are, and you can even set it as a default. So every time you create your BOM, it's going to use the same style. That's extremely useful, so we can capture that information. It's very similar to the way we do that in SolidWorks as well. All right. So let's go ahead, and this time I'm going to select all my components, and we're just going to choose to create callouts. Now I have the option to show these in a specific positions. I can do top and bottom. I can have them be parametric, so they rotate them all. They're kind of aligned with that. As they're jumping around there, what they're trying to do is not cross over each other. I could put them all in a rectangle if I wanted to, or I could put them all at the top and the right. So let's just do that because that kind of keeps them nice and clean. All right. So now we have that content updated. Let's go ahead and update our view. So we'll just choose to update our view. And now all that information is captured in that particular view. All right, so let's do a little recap here. So we talked about how we can easily manipulate the geometry, how quickly and easily we can create a parts list, and how that parts list is fully customizable as well. We're going to go ahead and do a quick update so we can reflect that information in there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about styles and some vector graphic output that we can get out of Composer as well. So let's go ahead and start talking about our update. So we're going to jump over to SolidWorks, and we're going to open up our boom assembly. So there's an engineering change. I'm working on my documentation, but there's an engineering change that's going to happen. So let's go ahead and show some of this. And this is typically how things happen in the real world as well. You know, if you start working on your content, if you wait too long, then the end time to get the product out the door may take longer because you're waiting on that documentation. So this allows us to start much earlier in our process. So we're going to go ahead and just turn on our knuckle kits. So we added that, and we're also going to make a quick adjustment of our this guard here. There's actually been a change to our guard, so we're going to replace this with a very similar but different guard as well. So we're going to go over to here, select that one, replace that component, and then we just saved our document. Okay, so we have had a pretty significant engineering change at this point. Let's jump over into Composer, and let's go ahead and make that information show up here as well. So all we need to do is go to choose to do an update. I have to save my assembly first here, so we'll save that. And now we're going to update that using that exact same SolidWorks assembly that we just opened. So when I choose to update that, it's using SolidWorks now to go out and look and see anything that has changed or been added to my assembly structure, and it's going to add that right here into my Composer document as well. So we'll see my knuckle kits get added, as well as this cylinder guard over here is adjusted as well. And all of my views have been updated as well. So if I have a look at my original default view, we can see that the knuckle kits are added, the guard is changed. And then everything is in my parts list as well. Now, our knuckle kits are not part of our parts list yet, so let's go ahead and add those to it. We're just going to select them off the tree. in our BOM workshop, we're going to choose to create a BOM ID for those. We see right there, our knuckle kit has been added. We need to get a call out. So we just added a call out there as well. So all that information is quickly updated and carried over into our Composer document. So the last step here is we want to update our view so that information is captured. Okay, does anybody have any questions to this point? Looks like we do have a question. Can you update only one part of the assembly even though multiple parts have occurred? Yes, you can. It's just a different update process. In order to do that, all you need to do is you go to the Geometry tab, and when you select on a particular component, you can choose to update only that component. So if only a single or a couple of components have changed, you can choose to specifically update those and not update the entire assembly. Okay, very good question. All right, now before we move on to our next step, let's talk about another one of our workshops. This is our technical illustration workshop. This workshop is going to allow us to spit out line art. So we're actually talking about vector content here as opposed to a raster graphic. A raster is pixelated. It's like taking a picture with a digital camera. And vector art is true line art. We have multiple options here. We can change the line weights, how thick we want lines to be, whether or not we have shadows turned on or not, color regions. We can have hot spots and how we're going to use those. Let's go ahead and simply create a simple preview here. And this is going to give us an idea of what it's going to look like before we actually save it out. We have another question too. We'll get to that in just a second. So here is our vector art that we set out. This is an SVG file. It's a scalable vector graphic. And why is that important? Screen resolution sizes are always different. So by simply spitting out this scalable content, you see it's interactive, and no matter what screen size I'm using, it's going to scale to fit automatically on that screen. So even if I go back to the full screen, you'll see how it fits. And that interactive highlighting, there's nothing special happening there. This is just a matter of saving out this content, and Composer will automatically generate that. How do you resequence the BOM IDs? Resequence the BOM IDs. And I'm not sure, are you asking about getting these in a specific order? Or are we asking about what order they're listed in here? Let's see if we can get a follow-up question to that. The item numbers were in an order and they just updated. In my table. Oh, okay, I see what we're saying. So what happened here, when I added my knuckle kit, they were not in the correct order here. So I just went over to my BOM tab and I selected to sort by a specific column. So I could sort by part number, I could sort by BOM ID, description, and that's going to kind of determine what's being chosen there. So by sorting at the top, just getting them in the correct order, that's what we're talking about. So I believe, Troy, is this what we're doing to answer your question? Yes, okay. There's another question here. Can you sort the BOM by a part number? Yes, I believe I just answered that as well. Jody, did that answer your question? Okay. All right, well, please continue to ask questions. There's all good information here. Okay, so we created our scalable vector content. Let's real quickly, just to show you a different option here. Let's add some shadows, or remove some shadows, just to be a little bit different. Also, let's change the line width. Instead of 0.5, let's just do 1.5. I'm only doing this so you guys can see that there very quickly you can make changes and actually adjust what you're looking at. And until you get, see, that thickened that up. That doesn't look very good at all. So obviously we wouldn't want to do that. So we can simply close that and then jump back over here, 0.5, re-preview, and then we're going to get a much cleaner image again. Okay? So very simple to make those types of changes and to get exactly the content that you're looking for. Notice we were using sharp edges. If I switch that to construction, again, I'm only showing you how quickly we can make these adjustments. See how those edges were not there before, and now we have a much cleaner looking content. Okay? Looks like we have another question. Are you able to use an older version of the part? Yes, you are, but that's going to be mostly controlled by your PDM system. Or if you're not using a PDM system, you could, if you had older versions of that component, as long as they were the same name of the component, then absolutely you can use an older version. It's a matter of updating, choosing specific components. If I was to select like this end plate here and I wanted to use an older style, as long as that part was the same part, it doesn't have to be the current Solidworks part. It can be any part, and you can select that, and then I could choose to update that component, just like we discussed before. Does that answer your question, sir? I'm just waiting for a response for everyone else. Okay, so let's have a look what we've been talking about here. All right, so we discussed the last few items there. Styles. We have not done styles yet. Let's do one more exploded view. So now that we've added that knuckle kit, let's go ahead and add a simple exploded view for that knuckle kit as well. And we have some very nice viewing options. So what I would like to do is I'm just going to select on that particular component there, and from my right-click menu, we have a lot of different ways that we can view and show and hide specific items. I only want to show what I have selected there, so I'll just choose Show Selection. And that's going to hide everything else. And only show the knuckle kit. Now this is going to let me create some more content here. We're going to talk a little bit more about some different exploding techniques. So let's go ahead and first of all, we're just going to move that. And let's grab a couple of these components. We're going to move these out of the way. I'm just simply using our translate tool to move these components. Maybe this nut here, or bolt, we pull that one out a little bit. And now we have one that's over on the other side as well, but simply by holding down the tab key or pressing the tab key, I can actually temporarily hide components to select them so that I can do whatever activity I'm looking for with them. That's an extremely useful piece of the software. It doesn't force you to rotate. You can just simply hit the tab key and it will temporarily hide components. Okay, so let's take our, let's see, I'm just going to grab my expander pin here, and we're going to pull it out. And occasionally when we select on components, we may not get every component that we're looking for. And rather than going back and actually trying to undo and recreate those steps, like these components here. There's just select a couple of components here, and then I can actually reuse the position. So all I'm going to do is select to reuse the position of components I've already moved, and that's going to allow me to move those components directly to those. That's very useful because if you're not used to getting things or selecting all the components, or maybe you think you have everything and you realize you didn't later, you can very quickly grab those and move those to the similar location. Next, let's go ahead and talk about some of our actual explode tools. So we're going to just select some components here. And this time, instead of using a straight translate tool, we're actually going to use our linear explode. Just pull those components out. And I want to maybe slide that up just a little bit to make a simple little adjustment there. Okay. And then we'll do the same down here. Just grab those components. I can very quickly get to recent commands that I've done with my right-click menu. We'll explode those off. Okay, position that where I like. A few more explode tools over on this side. Oops. Just trying to deselect that component there. There we go. Now we can use our explode to pull that off. And very quickly, we'll just slide all that out as well. And we'll do the same over on this side. There we go. Okay. So now we have our exploded view created. We want to show some explode lines or paths, and we can do that a couple of different ways. We have a tool called paths, so I could select on a component and say that I want to do a specific path from where it came from. That's one method to do that, but that wouldn't work very well for these components over here because it came at an angle. So if I was to, let me just real quickly show you that. If I add a path there, it's going to come from the incorrect location that I want to show. So instead of using paths, let's show the actual polyline tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snap to these components so it's actually in the correct location there. We'll go from this component here. There we go. And then lastly, we want to show a line of this coming out as well. There we go. All right, so now we reposition everything. Now, the one thing about these polylines is we see that they're obviously not the right color. So we want to make changes to that. Now, every component, every actor, or every, we call all of our parts, we call them actors. We call all of our collaboration geometry like these polylines or those explode lines. We call that all those actors because we're essentially taking pictures of things. We want it to look very nice. But we have properties of every type of selection that we can select. So I selected on that polyline, and I can change things like whether or not it's actually on top of those components. I can change the color very quickly. I can change the line style that we're using. And there we see it's actually going through those. Now, if we want to reuse this over and over, and we want to make sure we're doing the same looking content all the time, we can do what's called styles. And styles are used, or they're a very quick way to just give ourselves some content. So we create a very quick style there, and now I can select these other paths that I'd already created and simply choose to use that style, and now very quickly all those colors have been automatically updated. So this is a very simple way. Your company will set up standards, and as these standards are these types of styles that we use in Composer, and this is how we reuse that content. Okay, we need to, on our BOM, we're going to go ahead and remove all of these. So I'm going to go back to my BOM workshop, and we're going to reset all those BOM IDs so that we have no IDs on any of these components, because we're going to create some new BOM IDs for these. So we'll just select those components, choose to generate some BOM IDs. We'll show our table. Also, we will create some callouts very quickly. Okay. So maybe we adjust our BOM position here. And this time, instead of using a specific positioning style like top and bottom, left and right, we're actually going to move these to what we call a free 2D. And that's going to allow us to create, sorry about that, that's going to allow us to create some what we call magnet lines. And these magnet lines are very useful because what they're going to do is they're going to allow us to snap to geometry. And then I just grab those and I can place those wherever I like those to go. Pick those up, and we'll just kind of reposition over on this side over here. And you notice how those are automatically staying on that line and positioning right where we want those to go. Let's make sure we get that vertical, and then we can also position the balloons in the correct order that we want. So we can just slide these around to make sure our lines don't cross. And we also have the ability to, if we want to line things up and make it look very clean, I have a little widget here. When I select that, I can choose an edge on my geometry to align that to. So I can very quickly line that up. If I want to move balloons from one magnet line to another, that's very simple to do. Also, I am not tied down to where Composer is choosing to point to those particular components. Let's take, just readjust some of these right here so we can see that you're not tied to any particular location. Oops. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and we will update our image. All right, the next thing we want to talk about is we're going to talk about creating some step-by-step procedures. This is going to allow us to create some rich content to really help visually understand what it is we're trying to do with our assembly. So let's go ahead and jump over, and we'll start creating some of that content. Looks like we have a couple more questions. So when we start having thousands of images, and these images update every quarter or so, is this where Composer Sync would better use itself? Okay. Richard, I'm going to come back to that question with regards to Sync. We'll discuss that in a little bit later. I was wondering if you can show both older version of the model and a new version of the model in the same document. No, Chad, that is not possible. It's a single, I mean, you would have to have a different name of that component. There's really no clean way to show different versions of the model in the same image at one time. You would have to have two different Composer documents, and then when you create your content, you could create your content for each one and then input that content into whatever creation tool you're using. So let's get rid of some of these. Richard, I'm going to remember your question here. Okay, so Richard, I will come back to that question. Okay, so let's kind of get back to our starting point here, and we want to make sure we get our rendering style correct. So we'll turn off per pixel lighting, and we're going to switch this time to a flat technical. And I'm going to use this to create a new view. And we're going to call this one our cylinder removal. Okay. So what we're going to start doing here is we're going to create some very simple content where we're actually going to reflect how to get things in the correct position. So let's just select the components that we want to use. And again, we're going to use our explode tools to pull off in a specific direction there. And we want to make sure we get the order of our components correct as well. But first of all, we're going to go ahead and change the color. So by adjusting the color, this really helps us see exactly which components we're dealing with and which items need to be moving. Just going to kind of reorder those components there. There we go. All right. And also what we can do is we can add some more content as well. Let's add an arrow to show that what's actually happening. So I'm simply just going to select my bolt and show that it's actually coming back through that hole there. And then I can position that arrow wherever I like as well. Now that arrow is a little large, so we want to adjust the scale of that. So we can actually just grab and adjust the scale to better show the arrow. So we're going to pull that component out. Now we're just going to update our view. And then we're going to keep going on to our next steps. Now, wait, before I move on to that one, let's go ahead and create a call out. We want to label. We're going to use a simple label command to reflect what we're doing with this particular component. So I'm simply just going to say this is my remove expander pin. And we can also then point to all the other components as well. So we do not have to, we're not limited to just the individual items. We can actually grab and reflect all of the components that we need to move. There we go. So we'll update that view. Okay. Now we'll move on to our next view. And since those components are going to be removed, we'll just simply select all of those components and hide them by hitting the H key. It's a quick hotkey to hide components. So once that's moved, the next step is going to be to actually move our cylinder into a retracted location. So I can just grab that and slide it down. And I also want to select both of those components because we want to, again, change the color to reflect what we're actually doing. We'll add another arrow to give ourselves a little bit of content there. And we'll just slide a position of that. Now, we can't see that arrow very cleanly, so what we can do is we're just going to change the the opacity of this component, so I can drag the opacity down. And now I can see through that and actually realize that, okay, I'm moving that cylinder in that direction. Maybe if it's a little large, we can just adjust the scale of that arrow as well and position it to where we think it looks the best. And then we'll simply update our image. So we're just creating one step at a time here. So the next, we need this to rotate down. let's just hide that arrow. We'll bring our opacity back up on that component. So the next thing we want to do is we want to rotate this into a position. So we're just going to select those. You can just drag that down. And we're going to create another arrow, but this time we're going to use a circular arrow. So when I select the circular arrow tool, there's a lot of intelligence here. You see it's actually picking up that circular edge, and then I can place that and give all the information that I need to. So instead of having the arrowhead on the opposite end, I'm going to put it on the other end. And instead of it being a flat arrow, let's make it more of a 3D arrow. I also have a lot of properties that I can use here. So if I want to adjust the radius of that, I can simply just drag up that slider. Grab the endpoint here. We'll bring that around. Again, let's get our scale so it fits proportionally for what we're looking to do. So now that we have that content, let's go ahead and update our image there. And now we have two more steps, and I think you guys kind of get the hang of what we're trying to do here. So let's create. Next is going to be removing our expander pin here. So let's go ahead and take these components. We're going to take them back to what's called our neutral properties. So that's their original color. So we're just going to restore that back to its original color. We don't need this arrow anymore, so we're going to hide it. And lastly, we want to grab these pins, so let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to use our same explode tools that we used before. And just customly position those components where we need them. Again, if you missed one, you can always just grab it and pull it right to where you would like it to go. Now all of these components, we know to follow the same style, we're going to change those colors to red. Add an arrow as well. Okay. And the last thing we need to do here, let's see, grab all those. Grab our cylinder and we'll simply move that to a specific location. We want that to be, again, red as well. And we'll add our one last arrow here. Okay. So now we have our content where we want it. If we would like to maybe create some animations of this, there's a very simple way to do that. I think we may have another question here. One second. What am I using to select through the components? That is the tab key. So as I mouse over a specific component, if I hold down the tab key, that will temporarily hide that component. So if I hit tab here, it will temporarily hide components so I can drill down into those. It's simply just hitting the tab key. If you're familiar with SolidWorks, 2013 SolidWorks has that same functionality now. You can actually hold down the tab key and drag over components, and it will temporarily hide them. And then shift tab dragging over will bring them back. So that functionality kind of came out of this tool composer. We're starting to see a lot of things like magnet lines and that tab to hide things moving over into SolidWorks as well. Okay, let's look a little bit at our created a quick animation here. So I'm just going to move over to my animation module, and I'm going to leverage all of the views that I've been creating all along here. So I'll grab my first one. We're just going to start placing these at 2-second intervals. The interval really doesn't matter at all. It's just whatever's going to look good. All right, and when I hit play, it's simply just going to play from one animation to the next. Okay. And now it's just a matter of manipulating components. So over in this area here, the transparency of that guard, so I can actually select on that component. And by using specific filters, I can choose to remove any specific keys. So I can just simply delete those. And now when I play that guard will actually maintain its appearancy. So it's a matter of just selecting the components and then manipulating the information that you want to use on those components. Okay. Can you create a style for an arrow, color, and scale? Absolutely. Anything that you can change, you can create a style for. So every property has the ability to change the style. And you can control and what we call subscribe and unsubscribe components to specific styles. So if I'm looking at a specific arrow, so when I select on that arrow, I can have full control over what I want to happen to that. All of the properties, you can see right now, I can't change any of the properties because they are specifically chosen to a very specific style. And if I want to make a change maybe to the color of that, I would have to tell that arrow to unsubscribe from that, and then I can come in here and make that adjustment to be a different color. So styles are very extensive and expansive for, you can do it for labels and arrows and balloons and callouts and all kinds of stuff. There's really no limitation to how we use those styles. Okay. Quick recap here. So we've talked about some graphical control of objects, how we can graphically describe things, use a very simple step-by-step process. Easily change and restore properties like we did on the transparency of that cylinder guard. And high-resolution image output. Let's look at how quickly we can get images out. So let's take an image like this one right here. And we're going to use one of our other workshops to do this. This is my high-resolution image workshop. And I have control over how, whether it's pixels, DPI, or physical size of the document. I can also set up profiles. So when I make changes and I want a specific size or specific pixels for any different type of documents, then I can set up profiles to reuse that information over and over. I'll go ahead and say preview here, and you can see we get a high-quality image right out of the Composer content. Now, this is the type of image that would then get embedded into whatever your document creation tool is. So that would be like Word or FrameMaker or Adobe Illustrator. Okay. Excuse me. All right, so next, let's start talking a little bit about some interactivity, as well as we're going to go ahead and finish this up by publishing this information out to an HTML document. So the interactivity is really quite simple to do. We're going to go ahead and start here with our default. And let's talk about one other workshop here first of all. Let's look at our image library. We can have libraries set up of our own content. We also have, Composer comes with a very extensive set of widgets that you can use over and over. You can link to your own stuff like we've done here. We've actually got our Ricimen logo. So I can simply just drag this out and drop it into my, my graphics area. Whether or not I want a shadow on that, completely up to you. If I could do shadow. Okay. We can very quickly change the size. And we also have a unique ability in Composer to do things like linking information together. So if I select on that particular 2D image, I can link that down here simply by using to link. I can link to all kinds of different things. I can link to different files, whether it be a PDF, maybe MSDS sheets, anything. We're going to actually just link this to a simple web page. So I can just link this to www.resimmon.com. And now when I'm in my HTML or in my Composer player, when I click on that, it actually takes me to the Resimmon website. We also have some other already set up things like some buttons to go to the next picture or the last picture. We have all of them actually here as one single one, so I can simply click on that and place that. And now it's going to take me from one view to the next view to the next view. We'll get another question here. We are running a little bit long on time, so if anybody has or needs to leave, completely understand. Trying to get my question to come back up. Sorry about that. Oh, run a little long on time, but you tell me please keep going. Okay, we'll certainly keep going. All right. So the next item we want to discuss here briefly, this is going to be some of that interactivity. So what I would like to do here, let's just kind of reposition this slightly. And I'm going to take this end here, and we're just going to move it out. But I can actually move it a specific distance. So if I'm interested in very specifics, we can choose to place that exactly where we want it to go. And then we're going to use that same tool we talked about a little bit earlier. So just reselect this, and then I'm going to reposition the rest of those components right out to that one. So what we're doing here is we're moving this to an extended position. And we're going to create a very, or a useful image for us. So we're going to use another workshop to do that. And this is going to be my views workshop. So what this is going to allow me to do, I can select these particular components. And here in my views workshop, I have the ability to say I want a very specific location for all the components that I've selected. So I'm going to remember the location as well as I'm going to link this information as well. So when I say create here, this is going to give me an image. And I'm going to call this my extended. And so I've captured the position of that in its extended state. All right, so now I'm going to just remove that or take that back to its home position, and then we're going to create one more of those. This is going to be its retracted position. All right, so now in that retracted position, I'm actually going to select those components again. So let's go back to this one, easier to select. So I select those, and I'm going to link those components to a specific view. So when it's in its extended position, I want to link that to its retracted position. And we'll just update that view. And in the retracted position, we're going to link that to its extended. So you can see how quickly and easily we can actually set this up to create that interactive intelligence within inside of our model. So we'll go ahead and do that one. Update that one, that view. And then we're going to come up here and we're going to update this view as well. Okay. So now we have some 3D content. Let's go ahead and reposition that. So let's now talk about publishing. We need to get these items actually in multiple views as well. So I'm going to very quickly just select all those components, or all those images there. And I can very quickly add those images to all of my documentation. So I can select all the views that I'm interested in having that information show up in, and choose to update those all at one time. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting those, I'm actually adding that content to all of those views without having to go to each one specifically and update that. In this particular view, my default view, I want these components to not be there, so I'll simply hide those, and then I can just update that view again. There we go. All right. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and talk about publishing here. Publishing is probably the easiest part of Composer. I'm simply going to choose to publish this to an HTML document. And we have some different HTML outputs where we can show different pieces of information. We're just going to choose simple here. And let's put this in my, let's just stick it on my desktop. And that's it. That quickly I published that out. So let's open that up real quick. All right, so here is my document. Again, it's 3D. If I select this and on this, it expands. If I click on it again, it retracts. So I set up that content. A couple of pieces I didn't put in there, so we'll show how quickly we can do this information. This is really simple to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and close these down. And let's show how we can get some of that interactive content in here. I'm going to take these two images, just drag them out here, kind of place them out there. I could add some 2D content here, some 2D text very quickly. This is going to be my parts list. Now I don't want to see the border or the shadow on that one, so we can just turn off the border very quickly down here. Don't need to see the border, don't need to see the shadow. I'm going to Control-C to copy that, Control-V to paste it, and then I can just remove this one over here. And this is going to be my remove cylinder. And then I can, again, use my magnet lines. And notice how they're not exactly lined up right now, but when I create my magnet line, it's going to automatically snap those right on top of that. So I can pick those up, place these wherever I like them to go. And I do not have to use a very equally spaced on my magnet lines. I can actually customize that, so I can simply move. It keeps them in line, but it puts them where I want them to go. And we'll go ahead and update that view again. And there's one more piece here. Let's go into our knuckle. We're going to select those two components for the knuckle there. Just going to select them right off my tree here. And we're going to link those to the other view of the knuckle itself. So we're going to link that to my view. Go to the knuckle kit. Okay. And then we'll update that view as well. All right, let's publish this out one more time. And then we'll go have a look at that. So you can see how quickly we can make very simple adjustments to our information. There we go. Now when I click on that item, it actually goes right into that, and we set up our hotspot there. So when I click on that knuckle component, it drills right down into that one. Go all the way back to the beginning. Click on the remove cylinder, and we can just step right through our process. The expander pin comes out. Okay. And again, always 3D, because we created that content as 3D. We have a toolbar we can turn on, so I can actually see what that animation looks like when I created that animation. So that's actually part of this as well. If few more things we can do here, very simply. There's a tool called the Digger that I can turn on. And now again, this is right here on our web page. You can see it's currently in a zooming mode, but we have some other tools we can use here. I can go into what I call the X-ray mode. Just kind of slide through, and I can see components on the inside of other components. And you can see how it kind of ghosts those other components, and as we move this around, it's updating that as well. We also have things like a clipping plane, so if we want to do sections through components, we can use that clipping plane for that information, and then we control how deep that clipping plane is going to be. Okay. And there's nothing special to do to get that to come up either. That's all part of the software. If I come back to this original view, I have the Digger here as well. You can use the Digger in all kinds of different places. You can point to specific things. Maybe I'm interested in this area back here, and I can actually capture that. Okay. Okay, that kind of takes us to the end of our presentation. We did go a little bit long here, but if anybody has any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask.